Hello, everyone. Welcome to your Astro-Weather Check for Monday's Libra full moon and lunar eclipse. There is a lot of very deep energy kind of beneath the surface with this full moon and this eclipse coming up. So, as promised, we'll have our Astro-Weather checks as standalone little segments moving forward, little video segments. Everyone seems to like these, and I'll keep it as concise as possible today. I do have a page of notes to get through to talk about, and we'll get into all that when we start sharing the screen and looking at the chart for the full moon. I'm sure that themes that are personal but also collective, we've already started to notice as we're kind of in the pre-full moon energy already. And this one's tagline is "in a relationship." So I just want everyone to keep in mind, as we're doing the discussion on everything, that that is not just necessarily a romantic relationship. We are in relationship with something at all times and moments in our waking and sleeping lives. We are in a relationship with ourselves. We can be in a relationship with our environment. We're always in a relationship with our environment. It could be a romantic partner. It could also be a friend, a family member, sibling, you name it. We're always in some kind of relationship. And that is one of the main themes of Libra is our relationships, our partnerships, but also keeping in mind balance, peace, harmony, aesthetics. There's a lot of themes and energies that go into the sun. So right now, this is going to be, it'll probably feel, if it's not already feeling like a big point of release in some way. And just think back, as I always say, I work with the lunar cycles on the long term. So new moon to full moon in the same sign, and that's roughly 6 months. So our Libra new moon last year was a total solar eclipse on October 14th of 2023. So this whole lunar cycle has had a lot of energy kind of coming up, things coming up for a release because it's the South Node's involved. That's where the South Node is right now. This will be a South Node eclipse. And we'll get to that more when we look at the chart. But just as I always have said in past episodes, the greatest description that I've heard for the South Node of the moon is the great anus of the zodiac. And I attribute that to Judith Hill. And it's hilarious, but also succinct and extremely true. So this is a very big, we release under full moons anyway, but with the South Node present, it's going to be even more intense. So I just want to recap a little bit kind of where we've been this week, because that is also significant astrologically and contributing to the overall astro weather anyway. So we started this week on Sunday, St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. On the 18th, we begun the spring equinox. We began Aries season. Spring equinox here in the northern hemisphere, if you're in the southern, obviously that's flipped. And that was roughly around 11 p.m. here on the East Coast. And just to, as I always do, I hit record. It's Friday, March 22nd, right around 11 a.m. here in Atlantic City on the East Coast. So our spring equinox was actually a little bit early. It's usually on the 20th, but here endpoints west, it was actually on the 19th. So that was the beginning of Aries season, astrological new year, International Astrology Day. So just being able to dive into this week has just been fun for me anyway, because that's always a fun time of the year and what I really do look at as new year rather than the calendar years that we follow. And it's just, this time of the year, the sun getting stronger. We have here, we talked about this a little bit during Tuesday's live. Spring is like a month early. I was in various parts of New Jersey, southern and mid New Jersey over the last weekend, and also parts of Pennsylvania. And everything is in full bloom. Cherry blossoms have full flowers. Weeping willows have leaves already on the trees, the buds, like everywhere, even here on the coast, which is usually a little bit delayed with the spring and the fall seasons. So it's interesting that we had the equinox officially like a day early, and here the lived experience is like spring is a month early. Like all the daffodils are already up. Things were starting to pop through the soil back in February. The robins came back in February, like early February. So it's interesting. I usually feel this really strongly with the solar energy as it starts to intensify. I had it was a very interesting experience kind of on that cusp of the sun moving from the late degrees of Pisces into early Aries. Just my dreams were extremely vivid. There was the solar flare or some solar flares I heard something about starting. So the energies are really intense anyway. And now we have this full moon to sort of top it off. And then we've been in eclipse season since the Pisces new moon back on March 10th. So that's already begun. And then the day before the equinox on the 18th, Mercury retrograde pre-shadow began. And just for anyone who doesn't know, that is when Mercury is moving direct over the same degrees that it'll be retrograde. So we have that kind of playing into the energies as well. And things just like feel a little glitchy in general, like glitchy in the matrix is kind of like with the dreamscape, especially. It was just wild. And I talked about a movie that I'd watched, I think it was on Sunday during Tuesday's live, called Dream Scenario with Nicolas Cage. It's one of the newer Nicolas Cage movies, and it was really, really interesting. That's streaming on, we saw it on HBO Max, but I think it's on other platforms. So if you can catch that during this time of the year, especially, I think that would be a fun one to kind of dive into and explore. So we have all of that already happening this week. And the full moon will be on here on the East Coast Monday morning, so the 25th of March around 3 a.m. And that will be a, like I said, Libra full moon. It's also what's called a penumbral lunar eclipse, so very partial. It's actually visible here in the United States. So if you're up in the middle of the night, you might actually get to catch like a little part of the moon getting eclipsed. And we're in eclipse season. Like I said, it always starts 2 weeks before the first eclipse. So that was the new moon in Pisces on the 10th, like I said. And I can link in the notes the episode I did on that. It was the last episode actually of season 3 of Becoming Chiron. We covered Pisces in general, we covered Chiron and Pisces, and we also covered the Pisces new moon. So I'll put a link to that for reference so you can dive a little deeper into Pisces energy if you'd like. And also if you have Chiron and Pisces, that could be a good one for you to check out. So yeah, going into this, it'll be 2 weeks after for when the full moon happens. So eclipse seasons always come roughly twice a year when the sun gets close to a node. So like I said, the nodes are in Libra and on the other side, Aries right now, South Node in Libra, North Node in Aries. It's Aries season. The sun's getting close to the North Node now, which is why eclipse season has begun. So we have a lot of planets kind of clustered on one side of the zodiac still. That's kind of been the case for the last couple of zodiac seasons. Aquarius season, Pisces season, and now Aries season. The clusters continue. And we'll cover that when we look at the chart. So just like recap, full moon, Monday morning, 3 a.m., eclipse. So let's look at the chart. Let's just dive into it because it's already starting to like bubble up. All right, share. All right. So this is our chart for the eclipse. And here in Atlantic City on the East Coast, it'll be a Capricorn rising. And the eclipse will be at 5 degrees, 7 arc minutes of sun in Aries, moon in Libra. So the eclipse will be full moon eclipse, 5 degrees of Libra, roughly. So you can see here how the sun is getting closer and closer to the north node of the moon, which is right here. And I've touched on this in several episodes before, and I'll actually link to the Libra New Moon Solar Eclipse episode that I did last year for that one. Aries and Libra, it brings up relationships. It brings up our individual selves and how we show up in partnership. Aries is us as an individual, us as independent, us doing our own thing on our own personal journey in this lifetime, in this incarnation. And on the other side, Libra is how we relate to others, our environment, friend, like I said in the beginning, friends, family, whatever the relationship is, we're always in some kind of relationship. And back in August, when we did the episodes around the Venus retrograde, the mantra that I kept repeating for that whole retrograde, but also a lot of the other things that were playing into it, was the strongest relationship I have is the one with myself. So I want everyone listening, tuning in, to remember that mantra moving into and the energy leading up to the energies that we're in now, but also on the other side, moving further into eclipse season with Venus in particular. Venus rules this eclipse. Venus rules this full moon because Venus rules the sign of Libra. Venus right now is in the sign of Pisces right here. It's a happy place for Venus to be. However, Venus just is coming off of a conjunction with the planet Saturn. That was on the 21st. So yesterday, actually, it was exact. So this adds a vibe to the full moon and to the energy in general and to the eclipse in a big way. Because as we've talked about before, when we've covered eclipses, the way that eclipses work is they bring things to the surface, things that may have been unseen or hidden. It's like a full moon. Lunar eclipse is like a full moon, but it's more intense than full moons usually are. Eclipses are like the nodes of the moon or shadow planets. They relate to dragon energy and dragon work as well. And I'll link to our dragons class that we did back in November also in the episode notes. So they bring things to the surface. They kind of act like course correctors, and they can be very subtle as far as what comes in, but it also can be like big changes, sudden things, all kind of happening at the same time during eclipse season. So the experience can be very different. It's usually very dependent on where this happens in your own chart. So if you know your chart, just know where your Libra axis is, and you'll get some idea of the themes. And I'll share a story that just happened to me before I hit record that really interestingly sums up this experience for me in a very reflective way. As we reflect and release under full moons, this just happened to come up right before I hit record. So I'll share that. It's kind of funny, but also illustrates well the experience that I'm kind of having with these South Node eclipses in Libra, which is, I've shared before. I've shared my chart. Libra is my 6th house. It's where my sun is. I have Pluto very close to my sun. I also have Saturn there and some other of the asteroids. So I've got a packed 6th house. I have a lot of Libra energy in my chart, and 6th house is our day-to-day, our work, our habits, how we keep our bodies functioning at an optimal level. So health comes into play, but more on a day-to-day level. And this time around, it just feels like work is the thing that's been really highlighted. But interestingly, when I share the story, you'll see how relationships were highlighted also, and the release of one that happened after the eclipses of this in the same signs back in 2005, 2006. And we'll cover that in more depth. So I digress. Let's get back to the chart. So we had, I covered this in the last Astro-Weather Check, I think, back on March 5th. We had Chiron and the North Node come together, and this is still very close. So, like I said, Mercury is also pre-retrograde now. So, Venus, Saturn, let's get back to that first. When Venus, Saturn come together, whether we have this aspect natally, whether it's a conjunction, a square, or an opposition, and when they come together in the sky roughly once every year and a half or so, this brings up the opportunity to really face not I want to say the harsh reality, but the reality of our relationships. And particularly now with the full moon and with where the nodes are, where we may be giving too much of ourselves over to the other. Venus is the planet that relates to the connection that we have to everything that we love and value in our lives. And going back to the mantra, the strongest relationship I have is the one with myself. Remember that the values come first. So things that might be coming to the surface under this energy are anything, anywhere, in any relationship where something is disturbing your peace. And remember what I said in the beginning about relationships. It's not necessarily with a romantic partner or person. Saturn gives us the energy and the oomph to take responsibility, to face the reality of things. Sometimes that can be facing a harsh reality. It just depends on your own personal situation. But this is very strong energy right now because, like I said, Venus rules this full moon and eclipse, and it's just coming off a conjunction with Saturn. So those are big underlying themes that are coming up in general, collectively, but also personally, just because we had these two together recently. The other thing that is going to bring things to the surface in a really big way, and I'll also link to our soul broadcast from February as it's all still very relevant. Pluto, see this blue line here? Pluto and the full moon are in a almost perfect trine. Pluto is still at 1 degree of Aquarius and the full moon's at 5 degrees of Libra. So that's going to bring subconscious, unconscious, deeper things to the surface, calling up our capacity for transformation and like letting this be a release of some sort that might even feel like a rebirth. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, we're in Aries season anyway. It is the season of rebirth. It is the season to remember our divine spark, our solar energy. So with Saturnian energy giving us the extra oomph, like I said, to really face the reality and take responsibility, we also have Pluto in this moment, in these moments as the moon is waxing to fullness, giving us the opportunity to really bring things to the surface in a very deep way that could also feel like a little bit of a dark night of the soul type of experience. We can experience that so much in our relationships just because in this human experience, relationships are a very primary thing and a very big way that we learn our lessons in this lifetime. Not so much always with other people too, but primarily about ourselves. Remember, we're in Aries season. So that energy is definitely infused into this also. And as you can see, like I said, we have this cluster here on the one side of the zodiac. So it's like the South Node and the moon coming together around the eclipse is like the handle of a big bunch of balloons for all the other planets that are kind of over here. What are these planets all asking us to do? Well, like I said, eclipses are like shadowy times anyway. Course corrections, things come up that get us more on path to an extent. And with Mercury being in the pre-shadow now, our perspective comes into play. Our mindset comes into play. Mercury can also, during Mercury retrograde times, old friends can come back into our lives to kind of teach us about maybe why we're not friends with that person anymore. So this is all brewing in the cosmic astro weather also concurrently. It's not too rare to have a Mercury retrograde and an eclipse season at the same time. So just know that this is going to be fully in the sign of Aries. The Mercury retrograde will begin on April Fool's Day here on the East Coast, April 1st, and it'll end right around April 25th. So it'll be from Mercury still has a little ways to go, 27 degrees of Aries all the way back to 15 degrees of Aries. So Mercury and the North Node, Mercury and Chiron, are in this conversation in a big way. They are all kind of sitting in the cave, brewing up something for all of us to really put in under the microscope this time around. Where can we be more independent? Where can we be more sovereign in our relationships, one, but also just in our life in general? Where can we dig a little deeper into ourselves to bring that perspective shift or whatever ideas are getting planted in the seeds of your consciousness to an extent? This is what this Mercury retrograde is going to be very much about. And this year, when I covered the last one in Capricorn, we're transitioning from earth to fire. And I'll provide a resource at the end to learn more about that also. So it's a very big shift as far as the Mercury energy goes too, because we're moving more into an action-oriented time this year and next year with the retrogrades being in the fire signs. So this release that's happening with this full moon is going to take grit. It's going to take action. It's going to take you kind of steeping in whatever's coming up during the eclipse season, especially the time between the two. So Monday, March 25th to April 8th, and I'll cover that one in another episode. That's going to be a whopper. Those 2 weeks in between is the really most intense time. So that's when the retrograde will be in full force, and it's definitely going to bring things up. And these are all the lessons that are kind of underlying in the cosmic weather, where all the planets are teaching us about all of the things that I'm covering. So I already covered Chiron, the North Node, Mercury, the North Node. I just want to make sure I get everything here. I have a whole list, like I said. So covered Moon, Trine, Pluto. And yeah, just the stelliums in general. At the two, so the end of Pisces, where Neptune's sitting, and I covered that in the last episode as well. Neptune and the sun come together only once a year. It's like it's a threshold, but like the biggest threshold that there is, kind of, because Pisces is the end of the zodiac and Aries is the beginning. Pisces is transcendence and Aries is the divine spark that brings life. So this whole section of the zodiac is very interesting anyway, just because of that energy that we have involved. And there's a lot of water and fire, which are two elements that are kind of incompatible. Water puts fire out. So just that kind of energy with elementally is infused into this too. So the one thing that is super, super important, which I've sort of kind of touched on in everything that I've said, a big underlying vibe is what's called a yod. And I've covered yods in this podcast before. I have not yods natally. So what we have here, as you can see, is this big green triangle. We have an almost exact yod between Venus and Pisces, Jupiter and Taurus, and the South Node in Libra. And what a yod is the translation pretty much is a finger of God. This is like a feeling of destiny. So whenever we have it natally, it's something that's kind of always there and ever present in our lives. When we have it by transit collectively, it's something to really tap into that's underlying the energy like in a huge way. So Venus and Jupiter are considered the two quote unquote benefic planets, the two that kind of bring more higher vibration energy to things. Jupiter's been in Taurus now since spring of last year, essentially, I'm pretty sure, and will be until around the end of May this year. Jupiter spends about 1 year in each sign. Venus is kind of whipping through Pisces at this point. Venus is in this interesting part of the cycle where traveling behind the sun and becoming invisible is upon us. And that is in Venus's cycle a few months every time. So Venus will go from the morning sky to the evening sky, and we'll have this time of invisibility and connection with the sun and the solar energy. So Venus is actually dropping from the sky very soon. So having these two connect and have contact with the South Node at the time of this full moon and eclipse is a really interesting thing. And it really puts that energetic focus on the release. So really think about that as you're tuning into what's coming up around this full moon, around this eclipse, how you're connecting it back to the fall eclipse season from last year, the new moon, the total solar eclipse that was in Libra on October 14th. And how things are culminating and are materializing in your life since then. You know, definitely focus on the primary themes in the context of everything that I've already touched on, but just know that there is some kind of ever-present finger of God destiny thing that's happening with all of this in general, collectively, but also individually. So the yod is a really, really important thing. It won't last very long because it's pretty much like 1, 2, 3 degree orbs are usually kind of how these come together. And Venus is moving quickly. Like I said, the South Node will move on. Jupiter's kind of trudging along in Taurus pretty quickly now too. So this is like an instant, a moment, a strike while the iron is hot type of feeling under the energy of this full moon. So I want to make sure I focused on that as well. And the other thing to keep in mind, if you want to learn more about this eclipse, if you want to see the path of visibility for any eclipse in general, I've touched on this before in other episodes. The website timeanddate.com is a really great resource. They have so much information on each eclipse. There's more information that you can dig into a little bit on the site that gives you like information on the overall series of eclipses. It's called the Saros cycle, Saros. Eclipses are like, I'm just brushing the surface to the, the depth that eclipses actually have. And you can learn more about them by digging a little bit more deeply into that information. There's a book out there by this woman, Bernadette Brady, called The Eagle and the Lark, which is another really great resource. I don't have a copy yet. That's on my list to get. That goes really deeply into the themes that are tied to eclipse families. I alluded to this a little bit before, so we'll get into that next as far as when the eclipses happened in this part of the sky in this way the last time. So every roughly 18 and a half years, the themes repeat, the cycles repeat, and it'll touch the same part of our chart during those times. So there's a whole other really cool things about eclipses that it infuses all of this, beyond what I'm touching on in this moment. So just know there's further exploration that you can do. And yeah, that's a good segue as far as reflecting back. So that is our Astro-Weather Check for the energy of the full moon in the time of the full moon. So the other way to work with these is to think back to when the eclipses were happening in the same space of the sky throughout your life. So depending on how old you are, roughly 18 and a half year cycles, you can have several times where this has happened before. For me, I'll get to that, but just for reference, the last time that we had eclipses like these, like the ones that are coming Monday and then on April 8th, were in the spring of 2005. So like I said, this will always touch the same part of your chart when they're happening in the same spot. I said Libra for me is my 6th house. I shared much more detail about all of these experiences in the first season of Becoming Chiron, when that was all just, personal shares. So 2005 was when I made the big switch from the job at the veterinary office to the first job that I ever had in the career that I had prior to becoming self-employed full-time. And the summer of 2005, actually, I started, the inner workings of it were really in the spring, but the full transition was in the summer of 2005. So really interesting for me that day-to-day work, like my day-to-day life changed dramatically during that time. But then also, so think about that and reflect on that for you personally. How does that look? What does that mean? What was happening for you back in 2005? And then you can even go 18 and a half years before that. So we got a letter from, we got a letter about, with an invitation to get quotes for insurance to see if we can save some money. You get these kinds of things all the time. It's usually goes into the junk mail pile, but this year, unfortunately, in New Jersey, insurance across the board went up 20%, which is really, really hitting the pocket hard on top of everything else that's hitting the pocket hard. Like, times are not easy right now financially for a lot of people. So that did not go into the junk mail pile. This time around, I'm like, okay, let's call and just see. So I called this morning before I hit record. It was on my to-do list to get done for today. And they had my phone number. It was for this one company that was specific to this offer, Liberty Mutual. So I've had my cell phone since 2005, also actually in the same number. So interesting also that came up today, because this was tied to the information they had about me was tied to my phone number. So they get to the point where they're asking the questions. And they say, is there any other driver in the household besides Christopher? And I'm like, that's my ex. We haven't been together for a really long time. And I just, I was just, wow. And I even said to the guy on the phone, I'm like, I can't believe that just happened. Like right now in this energy, as I'm about to record this episode, all about relationships and Libra and the eclipse. And I shared the story of that relationship when I talked about my Saturn return experience. So it was like 7, 8, 9, 6, maybe episode number for season 1 of Becoming Chiron, when I shared My story is about the Uranus opposition, my Saturn return, the mighty squares, Saturn, Pluto, and Neptune. So it was just really interesting that that came up today. And then I get transferred to another person, and the guy's name is Christopher. So can't make this stuff up. So for me, obviously, there's something coming up for release related to that relationship as well. And you can learn more about that. I'm not going to talk about it here in that episode of about my Saturn return in season 1. I'll link to it in the episode notes because it's just anecdotally really funny and like, astrologer good. I borrow that phrase from Chris Brennan. It's just like when things happen, even good, bad, whatever, it's all, part of the lived experience. But when it's can even be something unfortunate for somebody else, it's astrologer good because it perfectly illustrates the point and the energy and everything that I'm talking about right now. So just use that in your own, put that in your toolbox, my own personal experience that, stuff like that may come up, especially with Mercury kind of brewing anyway, during this time also, like friends, but also with Venus rulership, ex lovers, ex relationships, romantic relationships. I mean, he was my ex fiance, so interesting. So that happened. And then just want to touch on the last time Mercury retrograde was in the sign of Aries was March, April of 2018. So that was our last fire elemental year. And I bring that up because you can learn more about that. There's this one awesome astrologer, Gary Caton, who's written a book, Hermetica Triptycha, all about Mercury and the elemental year and that energy just as the lived experience, but also natally, like prenatally. So you can learn all about fire, the one that we're moving into, and other ones. He's going to do a whole class and presentation for the CIA Academy on March 27th. So coming up soon next week. And I'll put a link to that in the episode notes as well. It's only $25. You can join live. And but there's also, you'll get a recording and class materials if you can't be there live. So I just taught my first class for the CIA Academy back in November. Julia's wonderful. Highly recommend her, Gary. They'll probably go through all kinds of sample charts in his book and everything. His book is incredible. So if you want to learn more about Mercury in general, but also specific to the elements and the cycles of the elemental years, highly recommend, if you can, attending that class. So the only other thing I really wanted to cover today, two things. One, I brought back a lunar blend for this full moon. It is specific to the energy of Libra and Aries. So the two oils included in this blend are rosemary, which is the signature oil for the sign of Aries, and palmarosa, which is one of the oils for the sign of Libra. I've brought the lunar blends back this starting in 2023, and I'm just happy to offer them again. I just have so much fun making them, and it pulls in astrological aromatherapy, which is what I taught my CIA class about, and kind of like my primary thing that I pulled together in these two disciplines, aromatherapy and astrology. So it's just a small amount. It comes in a little 5 milliliter orifice reducer bottle. I don't want to open this. This is actually a complete one. So it's roughly 50 drops of oil, 25 drops rosemary, 25 drops of palmarosa. And this can offer some kind of energetic support during the energy of the full moon. I put these blends together starting in 2019, which was really cool. And I've been offering them here and there since then. People love them. I love them. It's energy medicine. So we're tapping into the law of correspondences here with the energy of the zodiac signs and the planets and the plants and the essential oils. So, like I said, rosemary is a signature oil for Aries. Palmarosa is one of the signature oils. It comes from a grass for Libra. So those are the two, only two in this blend. And it'll come with a little instruction sheet on how to use it and what you can do with it, and safety, how to store it, all of that. So that is up on our website. The quantity is limited. I actually sold one already. I only have 4 left, and they are only available under the energy of the full moon. So I'll take it down on Monday. So if you want one, they're only $15 plus shipping and handling and sales tax. And I'll put a link to those as well in the episode notes. So get your lunar blend if you want a little extra support under the energy of the full moon that's incoming. We have a nor'easter coming in this weekend here on the East Coast. So the wind and the unsettling and all that is sort of present again. The last several season changes that we've had, it's been some kind of storm, some kind of wind. Like we're in that cardinal energy anyway, which is really interesting how this is all kind of happening. And I mean, what I mean by that is Libra is cardinal air and Aries is cardinal fire. So we have yet another chaotic equinox experience coming with another storm that's going to hit. So I'm preparing to kind of hunker down and diffuse my lunar blend and think about all the things that have come up. So that's how I'm going to spend my full moon and eclipse experience. And yeah, the other thing I just wanted to mention is I'd love to offer you support through a reading. If you haven't had your natal chart done before, we can dive deeply into that. That's my birthday sky offering, and I have two versions of that, an hour, which is just one session, and then 2 hours, which is two sessions. And we can look at where the eclipses are happening in your chart and kind of just see what themes have been brewing and what themes are kind of maybe coming back up since the last time that the eclipses were happening in 2005 in the same space. And I also offer astrological aromatherapy as a service. So we look at your natal chart and then we can make a personal blend for you depending on where you're at energetically with your natal chart / lesson plan. And we can offer support that way. And there's a whole bunch of different ways we can work with that. And then I'll be back doing in-person readings at the Sage Lady at Zen Landing Wellness Studio in Mays Landing, New Jersey on April 4th. So right smack in the middle of the time between the two eclipses. So you can book ahead for that, and I'll put a link for everything in the episode notes. And if you're already familiar with your chart, if you want to meet in person for a half hour with me, we can just talk about whatever you want, focus on the eclipses, focus on the Mercury retrograde, and yeah, all that. So I think that that's all I wanted to cover for today. I have some ideas about when I want to start season 4 of Becoming Chiron. Probably April-ish, I'm thinking. I have some elections sort of penciled in, I guess you could say, for the energies that I want to work with the start of that. And season 4 is going to be very different than the last two. It'll kind of be more like a throwback to season 1 where it's personal shares. I've gotten some really cool information, messages, whatever you want to call it, in my dreams, because I always tap in spiritually first to see kind of what wants to come to the surface, what Chiron's wanting to teach through me, as that's the whole reason why I started this project anyway. And we're coming on year 2. So April seems like a really good time to start anyway, since that'll be another anniversary for me for Becoming Chiron. So I'm excited about that. Stay tuned on that. We're going to dive pretty deeply into Pluto this time around, I think. So that's what I'm being called to do for this season 4. But like I said, as promised, the Astro-Weather Checks will be standalone from now moving forward. There'll be video episodes, and I did get in touch with Spotify support and figured out the problem. So this episode should be a video episode available on Spotify and also on our YouTube. And it'll just go into the general feed for the podcast as a bonus episode as audio also. So if you can't watch the video and you just want to listen, you still can on your favorite podcast platform. It's on Apple Podcasts, it's on Amazon Music, and a couple other ones, but primarily Spotify and YouTube are the two platforms that I really prefer. They offer the most opportunity for listener support also. So just to mention that, stars, reviews, likes, shares, follows, always appreciated. Feedback, always appreciated. If you just want to reach out to me directly and email me and just connect that way, ursaalchemy@gmail.com. And that's always at the bottom of the episode notes, how to get in touch, how to support the episodes, how to support the show. Paid subscriptions also available if you can support me financially for $8.99 a month. That's generally also very much appreciated, as I'm in this weird space between being able to do ads and all that kind of stuff. So that really helps me keep going with this project. So I'm going to end it there as my voice is getting weird. So it's time to stop. We're 40 minutes in. So yeah, happy release. Take care of yourself. Tagline: in a relationship. There's a movie called In a Relationship on Amazon Prime right now that I watched yesterday, which sort of planted the seed for the tagline for the full moon. So dive into that if you can. It's an interesting interesting movie to watch that brings up a lot of the themes that I just discussed also. So remember, as always, to be a maverick. And till next time around the solar eclipse, for now, bye.